jump into the Word this morning, but as you heard already in announcements, this last week was a little bit of, we were kind of all over because the first announcement was we could do outdoor services. So we're planning to buy tents and heaters and do everything we can to make sure we can do some outdoor church. And then all of a sudden, the next day, it was like, no, you can do indoor services. So we're excited that this Sunday we're going to be back in person for Easter Sunday. Very excited. We have 3 service times. We're going all in on Easter because we miss you and we love you and we want to get this thing going again. So 3 service times this Easter, 9, 10:30, and noon. I want to encourage you, you can go to our website. You can register right now. And if you remember in the past, we've done where we ask people to go every kind of couple of weeks and just kind of temper their attendance, a little bit. We're not doing that this time. It's first come, first serve. So if you want to get to church every week, you just register, you get here. We'd love to see you here. And if we got to add more services to accommodate the need, we will do so. We've kind of had a long break, so we're ready to jump in. And if we got to do lots of services, we will do this. So starting next Sunday, Easter Sunday, services in person, which we will do all throughout the month of April. And then heading into May, there are some other challenges. We might have to move back outside for a bit, depending on what happens. But it seems like things are unfolding quickly now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. But we're going to go indoors. And, of course, to let you know, we're going to have all the protocols in place. We've been asked to wear masks indoors as we are doing everywhere. So if you come, you will have to wear a mask. We'll keep everybody far away from the stage so that when I'm preaching, I don't have to wear a mask. But everybody here, we're going to wear a mask. We'll have hand sanitizer as we have done before. We will have cleaning teams. We'll do all the rest. And we're also, this Sunday, going to take communion together as a church on Easter Sunday. And so if you are not able to make it in person, or perhaps you're feeling a little uneasy with the mask being in person and you don't like that and it's uncomfortable for you, that's fine. We understand. But I want to encourage you this week to gather up the elements of communion so you and your family, whoever's living with you there, you can do communion with us. As we're doing it in person, you can do it at home. And so gather up the elements in order to make that happen. But we're going to do communion together here on Easter Sunday. And of course, if you got any questions, you can always just let us know, message us through Facebook, email info@mylifespring, whatever question you have. But we're excited this Sunday, coming up Easter Sunday, to be in person, to see everybody and worship together again. I don't know how else to say it, but I'm pumped out of my mind. I can't wait. I'm excited. We do this for people. We don't do. I've been preaching to an empty room long enough. Well, it's not so empty today. My family's here, and of course we got a couple of volunteers because somebody's got to turn on everything and make sure it's running. So we got some people here that are excited to see this room filled, and God meets you in person here. So we're excited about that. Register online this week. Fill up those services. We'll see you next Sunday in person. All right, well, we're going to jump into the Word this morning. You got your Bibles. I hope you do, whether it's digital, whether it's a hands-on, tactile Bible. Turn to John chapter 2. That's where we're going to be this morning. My message title for you is called The Eighth Sign. The Eighth Sign. That's actually kind of tricky to say, and I'm going to warn you right now, that's going to come together at the end. So if you're kind of thinking that I missed that point, don't worry. We're going to get to it. You just got to be patient for everything to unfold in this message this morning. So John chapter 2 is where we're going to be. We're in a series called Encounters with Jesus, where we are looking through the Gospels, and we are looking at the stories of Jesus and how people encountered him and what changed in their life as a result, how things shifted and perspective shifted and the miracles that happened and what happened as a result in their life. Last week, we looked at Nathanael in John chapter 1 and how Jesus came, and he came on the scene and revealed himself as the true ladder. You remember it was a reference back to Jacob's ladder and the story of Jacob. and how Jesus was the connection between heaven and earth, and he kind of makes this reference to the Old Testament and kind of brings it into the New. And so now we're going to go jump into John chapter 2. And Jesus continues to reveal himself to the people. He continues to reveal himself and reveal the purpose for which he came to earth and why he showed up on the scene. And so we're going to look this morning at the story of when Jesus turned the water into wine. And I want to walk through this verse by verse. We're going to kind of preach through it. It's a little bit different, a little more exegetically this morning. We're going to walk through verse to verse through the scriptures and kind of pick out what we can learn from Jesus and what he's trying to accomplish in John chapter 2. But before we get into the story, I actually want to start in John chapter 2, verse 11. I want to start at the end of the story because there's a significant point that helps us understand what is really happening. And so verse 11, which is after everything's happened, and then we'll go back, but it says this in John chapter 2:11, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. John very intentionally in his gospel doesn't use the word miracle. He uses the word sign. And you notice he said this is the first sign. This is the first sign. And this is not an accident. He doesn't use sign by accident. He actually uses it intentionally because we understand that a sign actually points us towards something. A sign points to something beyond the moment. It's the understanding that there's a deeper meaning to this. There's something that we don't see. Obviously, when you see an exit sign, you know it's not just pointing to a blank wall. It's leading you somewhere. It's pointing you somewhere. And so John in his gospel uses this term sign as a way to help us understand that everything that's happening in this story, everything that's been told in this story is a sign, not just a miracle. It wasn't just a miraculous moment, and it was, of course, but it's actually pointing us towards something deeper beyond the moment, a deeper revelation. And so John's hinting in chapter 2 that there's a lot more to the story than what we can see, which is really mind-blowing because if you remember, at the end of his gospel, John says, listen, if we could actually record all that was really happening in the life and ministry of Jesus, he said, I suppose not enough, the world would not be able to contain all the books that would be written about what Jesus did, which is mind-blowing, really, because there's the story, but then there's the story beyond the story, which is what John is saying. This is a sign. It's pointing to something deeper. It's pointing to something greater. And so our task is to look not just on the surface, but to look beyond the surface to understand there's something greater going on. Because I think a lot of times we read the Bible and if we only look at it just at a natural level, we can actually miss what is really the whole point of the story. You can miss it by just reading it the natural. Like you've probably heard this story of Jesus turning the water into wine. You thought, like, that's kind of a weird miracle to start with Jesus, because John said it's his first sign. Why would you start with this? It's like, I guess Jesus liked to party. I don't know. But that's not what's happening. Actually, what's happening in this story is that something that it would have a cosmic and eternal ramifications for all of humanity that is opening up in this moment. What's happening in this story. And so we look a little deeper. John's saying it's not just a miracle, it's a sign. And if you notice, he said it's his first sign. In John chapter 4, verse 54, he said Jesus healed an official's son, and that was his second sign. And so John is actually, through his gospel, taking note that there were significant moments and significant signs that were happening. And in fact, you need to know that chapters 1 to 11, John is called the book of signs because John takes 7 signs of Jesus, 7 miracles that he does, and he says these 7 signs point to and reveal something about Jesus that we don't actually see and understand. That there's something deeper, there's something greater. And he says, he goes through these 7 signs in the Gospel of John. Now, this is really significant. The number 7, as you know, is very significant in Scripture. And it was significant to the Jewish mind as well as John's writing his gospel. The number 7 had real significance. And a lot of times we see numbers in the Bible, and our first thought is that it's a quantitative measurement. But a lot of times in the Bible, it's not so much quantitative as it is qualitative, that it's representing something beyond what we see there in the moment. The number 7 in the Bible represents perfection or completion. Fullness would be another way to understand it. It represents the perfection. It's the perfection. And so John is saying there's these 7 signs that point to the fullness, the perfection, the completeness of the work of Jesus. This is what he's trying to help us understand. And we need to understand that when we read the Bible. Anytime you see the number 7, like in the book of Revelation, right? 7 letters, 7 seals, 7 bowls, 7 trumpets. And it's not that we should be going, I guess we have to wait, for like 21 different, judgments of God. What it actually is not so much that it's a quantitative measurement of how many judgments are happening. It represents the perfection, the completeness, the perfection of God's judgment on the earth, how final it is, how complete it is. So there's something that's happening in Revelation. There's something happening every time the number 7 is mentioned. It's a way of helping us understand there's something different or something greater. And so John, the number 7, is really a manifestation of the perfection of the work and the fullness of the saving work of Jesus. And it's John's way of helping us understand there's something deeper that's going on in this story. There's something deeper going on in the gospel. That these 7 signs reveal to us who Jesus really is. These 7 signs reveal something about his work to us, which is why it's so important for us as people of God and believers, whether you're kind of new to Jesus and you're just kind of starting to walk out this journey and figure out who Jesus is. It's important that we move beyond the level of living where we only live at the level of what Jesus does for us. We have to move beyond that level, because what we understand is what Jesus does is really a sign to point to who he is. And what happens in our life and what unfolds in our life, if we understand it, that what's going on in our life really is a sign. It's pointing to who Jesus is and what he wants to accomplish in our life. And if you live your life only on what Jesus does, then your emotions and your relationship with Jesus will go up and down, because, hey, when Jesus is good and things are going good, man, I love Jesus. When things are going bad, I don't love Jesus. Why? Because we're only living at this level of how I can get from Jesus what I want. But what Jesus is doing and what he's illustrating in this story and what John is trying to point us to is that there's something deeper. There's something greater. And this is what's happening all throughout the book of John. The second sign that he healed the royal official's son in John chapter 4. In John chapter 5, he healed the man at the pool of Bethesda who had been lame for 38 years. And, when the water was stirred, the legend was that when the water was stirred, you get in the pool and you get healed. But Jesus shows up on the scene, and he says, you don't have to wait for the water to be stirred, because the living water is here, and I'm going to bring you what you were unable to get for yourself. It was a sign. In John chapter 6, the 4th sign was when a little boy brought his Happy Meal. You remember that? He's got the loaves and the fishes. He brings his Happy Meal to Jesus. And Jesus took it and blessed it and broke it and gave it to people, and the crowd of 5,000 was fed. And they came with a hunger and they came with a need, and Jesus does this miracle. It was a sign that the bread of life was to help them understand he was their great provider. He was their great sustainer of life. In John chapter 6, Jesus also walked on the water to the disciples who were caught in a storm. I referenced that earlier when I prayed. He walks out to the disciples in the storm, a storm that Jesus sent, by the way. He knew the storm was there. He sent them into the storm. And when Jesus walked to them in the storm, it gave him the opportunity to reveal himself in a way that they hadn't seen before or hadn't known before. in the way they hadn't understood. And the only way they would understand that revelation of Jesus was to be able to go through the storm. There was a sign that Jesus was pointing them to something. In John 9, he heals a man born blind. This is to reveal the glory of God. It's a sign. And finally, in John chapter 11, he performs the seventh sign, which foreshadows the work which he came to do when he shows up at the funeral of Lazarus. And he raises him from the dead, pointing to the cross, pointing to this revelation of himself as the resurrection and the life. So there's these signs that happen all throughout John's gospel in the first 11 chapters. But here we have the very first one. That's what we're dealing with today. And so we start in verse 1 of John chapter 2, this first sign. It says, on the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Okay? And I think what's important for us to understand right off the hop is that weddings were a big deal in Bible times. They're still a big deal today. I mean, but they were really big. And running out of wine may seem like a silly little thing to you and me. You know, you run out of wine, I'll just drink water, have a soda, whatever, you know. But in their culture at that time, shame and dishonor were very important. And it was very dishonoring for you to run out of wine at a wedding. And there were people in the Middle East that would take their own life based on the shame that would be associated from these events. They would literally take their life because they would rather take their own life than live with the dishonor of failing in this moment. Because a wedding wasn't just a social outing. It was actually a legal obligation. So you come and we're gonna kind of have this wedding, and you give your daughter, and so I give you 10 goats or something like that, and I'm gonna provide now as the bridegroom. I'm gonna provide everything that's needed for the reception. And in their culture, according to Levitical law, if you ran out of wine or you didn't fulfill your end of the bargain, your mother-in-law could actually take you to court and sue you and kind of get you into financial debt right from the beginning of your marriage. And you thought you had family drama. I mean, how would you like to start your marriage that way? Hey, so happy you got married. Now I'm going to sue you because you ran out of wine. And so all this is happening in the background. And this isn't just a case of what a bummer. Like they ran out of something. This is actually quite a serious problem. And when you understand that background to the situation that's happening, that it wasn't just a bummer, it was actually a serious problem, that the bridegroom and his parents would be quite stressed out at this moment because this is not going to be good. He wasn't, and so you see, Jesus wasn't just trying to keep his guests happy by providing more wine. He's literally saving this young couple from a financial liability that could potentially cripple them for a number of years. And I think that points us to the heart of Jesus in a real special way. That Jesus actually cares about what you care about. Jesus actually cares about the things that weigh on your heart. Right? This couple, this would be weighing on their heart. They would be watching the levels go down and realizing they don't have enough. They are going to run out, and this is going to be a serious problem. And Jesus, in meeting the need, kind of reveals to us that he cares. He cares about the things we care about. Because I think a lot of times we think God only cares about the big ticket items, heaven, hell, salvation, righteousness. But can I tell you, he cares about the things that are weighing on your heart. He cares about how your wedding plays out. He cares about your financial future. He cares about your kids and their health. He cares about the worries that dominate your thinking. He cares. And that encourages me that God sees what I'm wrestling with. God sees what I'm dealing with, and he cares, and he watches over it. But interesting that verse 3, when it says, when the wine was gone, Interesting that Jesus, the miracle story, the miracle event actually didn't begin until they ran out of what they had personally brought to the party. I think there's something significant there for you and I. That Jesus didn't actually begin to move until what they had provided had run out. And Jesus, who is a guest, is about to provide what the host couldn't provide. And this is what Jesus does in our lives. That when he comes into your life, he meets the need of your own heart in such a loving and gracious way. Because Jesus could have walked around and he could have said, hey, listen, I'm going to do this miracle, but man, you should have planned better. You should have thought this through a little bit more. You know, you should have had a little foresight. He could have brought shame to the couple. He could have embarrassed them, but he didn't do any of that. What did he do? He covered them with grace, and he loved them. I think a lot of times we think when we come to Jesus, Jesus is just going to, he's just going to unfold all our sin and all our brokenness in front of people. But that's not what he does. He loves us, and he covers us, and he watches over us. And so they're out of wine. And his mother Mary, and this is important, she didn't know what to do, but she did know who to go to. And I think that's really important. And actually, this kind of sets up one of the most, I think, formative and definitive questions we can ask of our own lives. Because Mary, she sees the situation. She hears they run out of wine, and she goes, like, I don't know what to do, but I know who I'm going to go talk to. Obviously, as the mom, she knew Jesus better than anybody, and she takes the problem to him. And what does she say? She turns to the servants. She says, just do whatever he tells you to do. Like, I don't know what he's going to do, but he's going to do something. He's going to meet the need. Just follow his instructions. It's going to work out just great for you. And again, I think this reveals a question of our own heart, because Mary had a trust in Jesus that he would take care of this situation in a way that only he could. And here's the question I think we have to answer for our own hearts, is do I trust his heart when I don't understand his work? Do I trust his heart when I don't understand his ways? Do I trust he's working when what I see makes no logical sense in my mind? When I'm, like when the wine runs out in your life, and go ahead and make that the symbol for whatever it is you're up against right now. Go ahead and make that the symbol for the battle you're facing in your life. So when the wine runs out, it's the diagnosis you get from the doctor. When the wine runs out, it's the bill that you can't make payment on. When the wine runs out, it's the future that seems so uncertain that you thought was certain and now is crumbling before your eyes. That when the wine runs out, it's the marriage that's unstable, the kids that are acting up, the pain that you're walking through. When the wine runs out, make that the symbol. And when the wine runs out in your life, do you trust the Lord that he's got the situation under control? I think I've seen it over and over, is that when people kind of go through a season when they feel like the wine is running out in their life, they make one of two choices. The first choice is, I don't understand, but Jesus, I choose to trust you. And the second choice, which sadly many people make, is I don't understand, and Jesus, I just choose to abandon you. I choose to leave you. Forget this, I'm done. I don't believe in God. I don't believe he cares about me. This is too hard. I don't believe in his sovereign hand on my life, guiding, leading me. And I've watched people walk away from the Lord in a moment where the wine feels like it's running out in their life. Again, wine representing what you bring to the table. It's what they brought to the party. Wine representing those moments in your life where you don't know to turn and you don't know what to do. And Mary says, listen, I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust that he's got it all under control. So just do what he tells you to do. When you're in that moment and you feel like, I don't know what to do, your heart has to get to a place where you say, Lord, I don't understand, but I choose. I make the decision to trust you. Because remember, every need in your life, every moment in your life is pointing to a deeper source. It's a sign that reminds you of the access you have to something greater. a deeper place of strength, a deeper place of joy, a deeper place of confidence, a deeper place of peace and trust. And when your world looks kind of like God has forgotten you, do you position your heart like Mary did and say, just do what he says? Just do what he says. Do you believe Jesus is in control when things look like they're kind of sideways? Because I can tell you that the ones that have endured, and it gets easier. I will say that. The situations don't get easier, but it does get easier because what happens is as you choose to trust, then the next time you hit a situation, you go, oh, okay, I got it. Lord, I see you're doing something. You're pointing me to something deeper, and I trust you, and it gets easier to walk through that. Not that the pain is easier, like I said, but the trust, the decision to trust is easier because now I can walk through this because he's done it before. He'll do it again. He's provided before. I've run out of what I brought to the party, and now Jesus is stepping in. He's providing a need. And can I tell you, you can have this confidence. Jesus already knows what he's going to do. He already knows. He's actually already on his way to meet the need because Jesus actually watched the wine run out. He watched them come to the end of themselves. And you get a glimpse of this in John chapter 6. Actually, if you don't have to turn there, but in John chapter 6, when they're feeding the 5,000, and Jesus looks around and all these people are hungry, and he turns to Philip and he's like, hey, where are we going to get all the bread to feed these people, huh? And Philip's kind of like, I don't know. But you know what John 6, it says? Jesus asked this to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. He already knew the miracle that was on its way in John 6, just like he did in John 2. He knew what he was about to do. But he waited for them to come to the end of themselves so that he could step in and they could say, Lord, because I think Jesus lets us get to the end of ourselves because if he didn't, we would take all the credit, wouldn't we? We would take the glory. We would take the credit. But Jesus lets the wine run out. He lets you get to the end of yourself so he can step in, so he can get the glory. That's what it says in verse 11. He gets the glory. It's the purpose of the sign so that Jesus gets the glory. And that's what's happening in this story. Now jump back to verse 4 for a minute. And I want to clear something up for everybody. I think it would be really important because Jesus says this, and he says in verse 4, woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not yet come. And can I just give you some pastoral wisdom and advice that you would not address your mother, you would not address any woman that way. That is not a good idea because we can look at that and go, man, Jesus just like sassy molassy there. What's going on? But when you understand in the original language is actually not a derogatory term. It was a term that in the Greek meant ma'am or my lady. It was actually a term that was used in reference to someone that you loved. And so I wanted to clear that up for everybody because if you read that and you go like, well, okay, Jesus said it, I'm going to say it. I'm going to walk around. Woman, you're like, that will not go well for you, okay? You can try if you want. And then you're going to come and show up at Easter Sunday with a big black eye. We're going to know what happened to you. So you just got socked so don't do that. Don't get sassy in that regard. It was a term of endearment. But he also says this, my hour has not come. And this is a phrase that John actually references all throughout his gospel time and again. And it's a phrase that refers to the moment, the hour of him going to the cross. That John, when you trace that phrase all throughout his gospel, you understand that Jesus is referring to the cross, the greatest moment of glory in the history, in the life of Jesus, which has been leading him up to the very divine moment where he would surrender his life for humanity. That was the hour that he was referring to. And now, what's happening in this story, as it did in Nathanael chapter 1, is that Jesus showing up on the scene and he's revealing the very purpose and nature of why he came. Again, it's a sign. That's what's happening. If you just think this is about a random miracle, like I did, and I always just thought, this is so random, water into wine. What is really happening here? It seems random, but it's not random at all. It's very intentional. It's very purposeful that Jesus is revealing to humanity to the Jewish culture. He's revealing to them. In chapter 1, again, talking about being the ladder, referencing an Old Testament story that they would understand so clearly. And he says to Nathanael, hey, listen, you thought, that's cool, that on the ladder, he said, you're going to see greater things. And now here they are 3 days later in Cana of Galilee at this wedding, and Jesus is about to perform this miracle that's going to blow their minds. So look at verse 6. Nearby, because this is where it starts to kind of open up a little bit. This is crazy. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. Now, this is the kind of detail, I think, that could be easily overlooked, that you would kind of miss the significance of this detail if you're just reading through the story. And miss the significance of this moment, because what seems like an arbitrary and irrelevant detail, like 6 water pots used for washing. Why is that important? But it's actually the very center of the whole story. And the whole story kind of hinges on this little detail, and it begins to unfold and reveal something greater because of what's happening in this moment. It's so cool. I love the Bible. It's amazing. So think of this for a moment. 7 signs in John. 7 signs that are leading us on this progression to reveal the perfection of Jesus' work, the fullness of his work, the completeness of his work. And now here in this story, there could be any number of water pots, but it's 6. 6 is the number of man. 6, because on the 6th day of creation, God created man. It's 1 short of the number 7. Obviously, we understand that. And it always falls short of perfection. That's what's happening here. It represents the very best human system of governance that mankind can produce without God. And so you have these 6 jars, 6 representing the number of man, representing what we bring, represented actually an old system, because these weren't just regular jars. These were jars that were used for ritual rites, purification, Jewish rites of purification and cleansing. So they would have these jars there, and they would come and they would wash their hands and wash themselves to cleanse themselves for purification rites. And it was a representation of an old system of law. This is what William Barclay says in his commentary, and this kind of opens it up for all of us right here. He says, the water pots stand for all the imperfections of the Jewish law. They came up just short. Jesus came to do away with the imperfections of the law and to put in their place the new wine of the gospel of his grace. Jesus turns the imperfection of religion into the perfection of grace. 6, the coming just short. It's not quite, it's man's effort. It represents man's effort to somehow get towards God. Now Jesus comes as the Messiah, and he opens up this brand new way into relationship with God. Everything represented by religion, the tabernacle and the sacrifices and the ritual and the cleansing and the washing, that could never fully cleanse your conscience. That's what the Old Testament says. They could never fully cleanse you. It could never fully do the work. Jesus said, you're always going to be left short if you try to get to God in your own terms, if you try to get to God in your own way. Religion and ritual is what Jesus is saying. Through this miracle, religion and ritual is now giving way to relationship and life and beauty, life abundant. Jesus came. And this is like a hand grenade being thrown into Jewish culture as they begin to recognize and realize all that's happening right here in this moment. And John references it in his first chapter when he says, the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus. So Jesus is entering into this wedding at Cana of Galilee, and these water pots that represented the old system, and now he's going to take what they brought and what they used to cleanse. He's going to transform it. And what's interesting now is the water into wine miracle really kind of echoes the Exodus story. If you remember when Moses went and confronted Pharaoh and he turned the water of the Nile into blood, really what this story is, it harkens back to that story, pointing to Jesus as the new Moses, the better Moses, the one who would be the true Savior for God's people. The Jewish people who had looked to Moses as one of the patriarchs, and he kind of set up the tabernacle and all the sacrifices. But Jesus came to bring grace and truth. This is what Hebrews talks about when it compares Moses and Jesus. In Hebrews 3, it talks about Jesus. Hebrews chapter 3, Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses. What's the point? The point is Moses set up a system that represents religion. What you bring to the party, what you can do to get yourself towards God. And Jesus said, forget all that. I'm coming and I'm turning everything upside down. And I'm showing up the scene and I'm going to do this miracle which is going to point you and help you understand that something greater is happening in this story. It's going to point you to a revelation of who I really am and what I really came to accomplish on planet Earth. That all your efforts to get towards God is going to run out. All your efforts to make yourself righteous in the sight of God will run out eventually. And will run out. And Jesus said, I came to bring a better way. Moses was the one who built the tabernacle. It was an old system. But Jesus did away with the need for a sacrificial system because he was the fulfillment of the old system. He was the Lamb of God, the perfect sacrifice, the one sacrificed for the sins of the world. And he came to do away with that so that it was no longer needed. And to illustrate that, I was thinking about, anytime we've had a child, and when you get pregnant, you go and you get an ultrasound picture, right? And when you get that ultrasound picture, it's amazing. You hold that picture and you're like, this picture is incredible, and it kind of goes on the fridge, and every time you walk by, you're like, oh, like this baby, it's gonna be amazing. But when the baby comes, you kind of forget about the ultrasound picture. Like, you know where it is. It's somewhere in a book or in a scrapbook. But the ultrasound picture is not as important now as it was then. It's because the picture pointed to the promise. The picture pointed to something greater, so you don't have the baby and leave the baby in the crib and go gather around the fridge and be like, oh, look at this ultrasound picture. It's amazing. No, you're like, it's the baby now because the promise is here. That's really what's happening in this story. Jesus showing up and said, you've been looking at a picture. You've been looking at a copy of something greater, but I've come to fulfill it. I've come to meet the requirement of the law and fulfill it and offer my life one-time sacrifice for all so that you won't have to do these sacrifices and rituals anymore. You're going to be cleansed from your sin. You're not going to have to come to these water jars and wash yourself every day like, oops, I did it again. I'm going to go and just wash myself again. No, he's saying, listen, I'll cleanse you once and for all by my life. And this is what's happening. Jesus is doing away with a system built on rules and trying to earn your way to heaven. The thinking that you've done enough to earn it. The thinking that in your mind that would say, because I think this is really the construct of religious thinking that even if you aren't religious, even if you're watching this service and you got on here somehow and you're thinking, maybe I'm an atheist or I'm not religious, but the construct of religious thinking is that the universe owes it to you somehow because you really truly believe you're good. Like, I'll get to heaven because I'm a relatively good person. And who do we always compare ourselves to? Hitler. We always compare ourselves to Hitler, even though there's plenty other tyrannical despots through history to compare ourselves that were even worse. But Hitler is who we always compare ourselves. We go to the worst case scenario and say, I'm not like that, I'm pretty good, so I'll get into heaven. The problem with that is that Jesus said, if you break the law at one point, you're guilty of breaking all of it. You're a lawbreaker. Now you're in trouble because there's a price to be paid for your sin. And Jesus came and he said, listen, I'm coming to pay the price for your sin. That your religious thinking, even if you're an atheist, even if you're agnostic, even if you're against God and you don't even believe in God, the very fact that you would think, I've done enough because I'm not done what that guy did. I'm not done what they did. I'm pretty good. That's religious thinking. It's your way of trying to earn your way towards God, and you can't. That's why Jesus came. He said, you can't earn your way, but I'm going to make a way. Every other religion on the planet, you have to earn your way. Every other religion on the planet, you have to earn your way. God is the only one who came from heaven to earth and made his way to you so that you would have a way to get to him. There's a better way. That's what Jesus is saying. There's a better way. There's life abundant. There's grace. There's mercy. This is what Jesus is after. Verse 7 now. Verse 7, Jesus says to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so. The master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink, but you have saved the best till now. Interesting that the need was for wine, but Jesus directed them to water. They had a need, but he didn't point them in the direction of their need. He pointed them in the direction of what they already have. And can I tell you this? That if you have a passion to be used by the Lord, if you have a desire to be used by God to fulfill his purpose in your life, I got some advice. Start with what you have. Start with what you have. Don't sit back and wait for the miracle moment, for the heavens to open and God to reveal this great plan and purpose for your life that you're sitting there going, I don't know what's going to happen. Listen, let me tell you, I love how it says the servants knew. The servants knew, because you know what I've found? I've been doing church for a while. The people that ultimately fulfill their destiny the greatest are the ones that serve. The ones that just say, whatever is needed in the house of God, whatever is needed, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, Jesus. If all I can do is hold babies, I'll hold the babies. If I can work a computer, I'll do the computer thing. If I can stack chairs, I will stack chairs. If I can pass out a bulletin, I'll pass out a bulletin. That you start with what you have. Don't sit around and wait for God to be like, oh, I know one day God's got a call on my life and it's going to be great. Just start with what you got. Start with what you have. Begin to serve. And church is opening up. We're going to start meeting together. Start with what you have. Start where you can serve, because the servants knew. And can I tell you, in the kingdom of God, the servants always know. And then when your heart is to serve, when your heart is to say, I don't need the glory, I don't need the recognition, I don't need anything. I'll just do whatever is called to do. We got great leaders in this house. Great leaders in this church. People that would come and they would just say, whatever is needed to make church happen, I'm in. Let's do it together, because the servants know. Can I tell you, it's the same way with you and I. If you want to fulfill God's purpose for your life, don't sit back and wait, just serve. Well, what team should I serve on, Pastor Bryan? It doesn't matter. It really honestly doesn't matter. Well, what about my passions and gifting? God will direct you to where you need to go. God will open up the doors. I've served in places that I've not had passion for. I've served in places only because of a need. And guess what? God taught me. He opened up things in my life I didn't even know I needed or was aware of. Man, you just serve in the place of need, and God can direct your path to his purpose for your life. Servants knew. Servants knew. So they needed wine, but Jesus directed them. And you're waiting on God, but I think God's waiting on you. God's waiting on you just to step in and start doing it. Step in and see what the Lord will do. I mean, even in my own life, I didn't sit here and dream about being a lead pastor one day. I didn't dream about like preaching to the crowd. I never dreamt about that. I just kept saying yes. Somebody would say, hey, can you do this? Yeah, I can figure it out. And then I would go and do it. And then ultimately, it just kept progressing, and God was leading me through. But my heart only ever was just to serve. Whatever is needed to make church go and for us to reach people, I will do it. Do whatever he tells you. That's what Mary said. Start somewhere. Do something. And so Jesus turns the water into wine. And what's really amazing is, if you do the math, is that Jesus provides more than enough wine for what is needed in this occasion. If you do the math, it actually works out to like 900 to 1,000 bottles of wine, which was significantly greater than what they needed. So he didn't just save them in that moment. He actually provided supernaturally for their future. Just call it Jesus' wedding gift to them. Here you go. Here's a whole bunch of extra. You can sell that, make a little bit of money, and get your feet going. You get on your feet, get a nice house together. When you get back from your honeymoon, you're like, here's a little gift from Jesus. And really what it speaks to is the abundant of grace of Jesus is the new wine. It speaks to his grace. Is that we come to him believing that he could never forgive us again. He could never love us because of what we've done. But can I tell you, just like it did in this story, that the wine that was saved to the end was better, it was sweeter. Can I tell you, with Jesus, it just keeps getting better and better and sweeter and sweeter. The longer that you serve him and you come in thinking, God, you can't forgive me again. God, I messed up again. I've blown it again, and I just can't overcome in this area. And God, certainly you can't love me. Or maybe you come to God for the first time and you think, God could never forgive me for what I've done and what I've thought and what I've said and who I've mistreated in my life. Can I tell you, the abundant grace of Jesus is illustrated in Jesus going over and above what was needed in the moment. That there's more grace than what you need for this moment. There's more grace, there's more love, there's more forgiveness, there's more mercy that is available for your life than what you even think you need. Jesus is coming and saying, listen, let me just pour it on. Let me just love you. Let me just pour on my grace and my mercy and my goodness into your life. It's the abundant grace of Jesus, and it's pointing to something greater. You see, and their understanding was the cheap wine comes out later. That's the way religion works. That's the way the world works. That it seems good at first. It seems really great, but eventually it runs out. And it goes the opposite way. It doesn't get better and sweeter. It gets worse and cheaper. That's the way religion works. It doesn't lead you to a place. It doesn't lead you to the Lord. It leaves you empty. But Jesus, he does it different. It gets better, it gets sweeter, and he turns it around so that the longer you walk with Jesus, the better it gets. The more your heart trusts him, the more your heart understands that he just loves you. And when you surrender your heart to the better way of Jesus, when you surrender your heart to his will and his way and his purpose, and you understand, God, I've been trying to get to you my own way. I've been trying to get to you religion. I've had this religious construct, this framework in my mind where I've tried to earn my way into heaven. You know, and it's not just atheists. It's not just people who don't know God. Christians do it too. We try to impress God with our devotional reading and our prayer life, and we try to earn somehow God's favor and goodness in our life, which you can't earn. Jesus in this story is saying, listen, you can't earn it. That's the old system. I came to do away with that. I came to fulfill it. He saved the best till now. And everything in your life that you're running out of is in Jesus. Everything in your life that you've brought to the party that you're running out of, just like they did, man, it's all in Jesus. It's all found in Jesus. The purpose you're looking for, the joy that you're missing out on, the peace that you so desperately need in your life. It's all found in Jesus. And maybe you feel like you're running out. Maybe you feel like your patience is running out. You feel like you're running out of your own strength. That need is there to point you to someone greater, to point you to something deeper. It's Jesus. In the scriptures, it's Jesus. And he saved the best till now. He saved the best to the end. And he does so with our lives as well. And so John starts with this miracle in chapter 2. And he goes through 7 signs. 7 signs. And the point of every sign is to reveal the purpose and the heart and the nature and the goodness of Jesus in these 7 signs. The perfection, the completeness, the fullness of Jesus. But the greatest miracle in the book is actually the 8th sign. The greatest miracle in the book, and this is the point of the message, is the eighth sign, the eighth miracle, which is the miracle of resurrection. It's the miracle that Jesus went to a cross and he didn't just die, he actually rose again. He didn't just go to a cross and die. He actually rose again from the dead. The greatest miracle that would reshape all of history and humanity is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The resurrection that would, with finality, would do away with the old system. The old system, and that in John chapter 2, Jesus is saying, listen, I've come to fulfill that. I've come to perfect that. I've come to do away with that. You've done that old system long enough. It's religious thinking. It's religious way. You can't earn your way to God. Jesus says, now, the eighth sign is him finishing his work, him doing away with the old system, giving all of humanity access to something greater, access to something beautiful. Now, here's something that I think is important. What does the number 8 represent? Number 8 represents new beginnings. The number 8 in the Bible represents the number of new beginnings. And Jesus coming and saying, I went to a cross. I gave my life. It's the 8th sign. It's a new beginning. It's a way of doing away with the way you've approached God, the old system, the religious thinking, and doing away with that, saying there's a new beginning now. There's something new. There's something not just for you, but for all of humanity, all of history. It's the way of the cross. And that I didn't just die, but that I rose again. And that first sign in John chapter 2, which he says, right, verse 11, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory. Jesus is revealing his glory through these signs, letting people know he was not just another man. He was not just another human. He was not just a great moral teacher. He was not just another historical figure, but he came to reveal his glory. And John builds his gospel in such a way that these 7 signs pointing to the perfection of the saving work of Jesus on the cross. And now he goes to the cross and he rises from the dead, the 8th sign, the 8th miracle, the new beginning for your life, for humanity, to say there is now a way opened up for salvation. Now there's a way that's opened up for heaven, and the way is through Jesus. Through Jesus. It's why we can say that Jesus is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. There is no other way to the Father except through him. It's because he did what nobody else did. No other religious figure, no other person in history did. He came from heaven to earth. He gave his life. He sacrificed himself in your place that you could have a new beginning. Jesus going to a cross, rising from the dead, making a way for all of humanity to receive forgiveness, to be made righteous in the sight of God, to have the wrath on the penalty for sin taken care of on the cross. He made a way for you and I to have a new beginning because of the 8th sign, because of the resurrection. It opened up everything. And as we're coming in now, Palm Sunday today and coming into Easter Sunday next Sunday, this is such a critical moment in the gospel story. This sign, the 8th sign of the resurrection that opened up everything for salvation. And as we come to the end of the message, I want to just say this. No matter where you're at, no matter where you are at in your understanding of Jesus, that you can experience the miracle of the 8th sign. You can actually experience a new beginning today. You know, maybe you're coming to Jesus today and this week has been rough. And it's been a hard week and you're thinking, I blew it again. I took a step backwards. I should have been praying more. I should have been more invested in my relationship with Jesus, but I wasn't. You can have a new beginning because of what happened on the 8th sign, the resurrection. You can have a new beginning today. There's grace, there's mercy today. His mercies are new every morning. So great is His faithfulness. You come into Him today. There's great mercy. There's great grace because of the 8th sign, the resurrection, the miracle, the pointed. It's all culminating in that 8th sign to say there's a new way, there's a new beginning, and it's in Jesus. And so whether you're coming for the 10,000th time or maybe the first time, maybe you're coming to Jesus this morning and you've never surrendered your life to Jesus. You've never said, Jesus, I want to give my heart to you because I recognize I've been trying to get to you in my own way. I've been running out of stuff in my life and the stuff that I bring to the party, my own ambition, my own insecurity, financial security, all the things we do to try and make ourselves feel better about ourselves. And Jesus saying, forget all that. Today's a new day. It's a new beginning. And that you can understand that Jesus sees you, He loves you, and He sees what you're running out of. Again, so many different applications to our lives. He sees what you're running out of. And this morning, He wants to offer you a new beginning. And I want to pray for you this morning. I want to pray that God touches your heart as you understand and experience the 8th sign. And so I want to ask you just to bow your heads, close your eyes, and if you're listening this morning and you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, I want to ask you to do so now. Make the decision right now for Jesus. We got somebody online that will connect with you, that will pray for you. You can just press the little button. I want to know more about Jesus. What is I'm not sure what the button says, but it's clear. You'll be able to see it there. Is to press the button. We got people that will connect with you. And maybe you're coming to Jesus for the first time. Or maybe you're just running out and you need the grace of Jesus in a new way today. You need to hit a restart, a refresh. You need a new beginning. Guess what? That's what the resurrection is for. That's what the 8th sign is for. It's a new beginning today. It's new mercy today. It's new grace. There's more than enough in Jesus. There's more than enough. You think He's looking at you one way. He's not. His grace is abundant in your life. And so let me pray for you this morning. Jesus, I pray for everybody that is participating in this service this morning. God, there's grace. There's fresh grace for their situation, for their life. I pray for every person that maybe is making the decision today to follow Jesus for the very first time, knowing that they've tried to get to God, knowing they've tried to do it on their own way. It's religious thinking, but Jesus desires relationship with them. Jesus desires relationship with you if you're listening to this message. He sees you. He loves you. He desires relationship with you. God, I pray that they would make the decision to surrender their hearts to you for the first time. And for every person, God, that is battling, is running out, is weary, is worn out, God, that you would give them fresh grace, fresh strength for the battle today. You give them fresh anointing oil of the Holy Spirit to have the strength to do what you've called them to do, to have the strength to walk out your purpose in their lives. I just pray for great strength in the revelation of the 8th sign in our lives. The resurrection power of Jesus would bring fresh grace, fresh strength, mercy. We would understand that everything in our lives is pointing to something deeper. And Jesus sees the need and He's leading us through it to give us a deeper revelation of who He is to us. Lord, we thank you for your goodness and your mercy in our lives. We love you and we give you all the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I want to thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you for choosing to hang out with us. We love you. We miss you. And we're going to see you next Sunday, Lord willing. Obviously, we got 3 services, 3, not 4, 3. And so you got to register today. And we will see you next Sunday, Easter Sunday. Have a fantastic week. We love you. We'll see you then.